Hey guys, I'm your UTF, and these are some kids I'm babysitting their friends. Say hi, everyone.
What's up, Press? Don't drag.
They just really wanted to say hi to you all, so hope you're having a wonderful week. Anything else you want to say before?
Don't cigarette.
Yeah, don't
Or
cigarette. Okay, bye guys.
Bye.
Okay, sorry. They really wanted to be in a video, so why not? So today I wanted to send a little recording about politics and the media. So let me share my screen, and if you hear screaming in the background, just ignore it. Here we go. Let me share. Not share. I always want to do that. Slideshow. Okay, so politics and the media. This picture, a lot of you might have seen this, but this is JFK and Nixon, and I believe it was back in 1960. But JFK and Nixon had their debate, and people who saw it on TV thought that JFK won, and people who heard it on the radio thought that Nixon won. And this was because JFK, he was a lot more put together. He looked a lot nicer on television. I think he was the first president to have a makeup team who helped him to look better while he was being recorded and doing stuff like this. And so this is one of the first examples of how huge an effect that media can play, and the things that we see online every day can play when it comes to affecting who we believe with our politics. So the first section of this presentation, I wanted to talk about a couple different means that the media gets manipulated. So first, media follows the money. If you see here, here's a chart from All Sides Media Bias, and this shows which news sources, like where they are bias-wise. So, CNN is really on the left, and then the National Review is really on the right. And so when you have these huge corporations, and these, not corporations, but when you have these news people, like, they're not going to want to out their audience. They're going to want to tailor their stories to their audiences. And so CNN isn't going to write something trying to get a super hardcore Republican to read it, and vice versa. They're going to want to write stories that their audience is going to read. So you just have to be aware of different news biases, like we talked about at the beginning of the semester. The second way the media gets manipulated, this is just kind of an example of how easy it is to control the media on your own terms. But there's this thing called levels of media coverage, and this comes from the book Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. And Ryan Holiday, he describes himself as, a former media manipulator. Like, that's what he told people his job was. And so he said whenever he tried to get a story on the media, these are the different levels he would go through. So first, there's the entry point. You would try to get a story onto a small blog or local media, because here the readership is local, trust is super high, and these are constantly needing new stories and exciting stories, and they can accept a wider range of stories because there's not exactly as much to report on. Like the New York Times has to report on everything across the US, but Cache Valley Daily, they've got to find stories in Cache Valley. So sometimes smaller stories are more easy to get on here. And then there's level 2, which is a mix of online and offline. And so he would try to get his story from these localized places and get them to somewhere a little bit more dignified, not dignified, I don't know what word I'm trying to say, but so places like KSL, Reddit, online publications of magazines. This is still media that has to update more frequently. It has lower standards than national media, and getting stories on these different types of sites will give that first story more credibility and engagement. So level 3 is national. And so he was saying, once a story gets on one of those smaller medias, those media sources are going to want to do everything to get it onto a national site, because then they'll get more traction, they'll get more clicks. They want this to become a bigger story. So not only are you trying to make your story get bigger and bigger, but the other sites that have already published your story are. So you're trying to get it onto a national site. So here's a quote from Holiday. He said, "Online publications compete to get stories first, newspapers compete to confirm it, and then pundits compete for airtime to opine on it." So here's an example of this. There's Pawlenty's non-candidacy. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry. So there's Pawlenty's non-candidacy. And so Pawlenty, he was a candidate who was running for president for the 2012 presidency back in 2010. And so politics, they are good for profits, especially for, you know, small online media sources like Politico. And so these small sources, they want to be the first to cover someone or something when it comes to politics. So Politico was the only media that followed Pawlenty's candidacy at first. You know, he had no campaign director, no bus, no donors, very little name recognition. Like, no one knew who he was. He had no money for anything. He wasn't really a candidate. Sorry about that. So yeah, Politico followed Pawlenty and acted like he was a real candidate. And they said, look at what this guy is doing, look at what he's saying. And through this, he ended up getting coverage by other mainstream media. And this kind of turned him into a real candidate just because he was in the news, because Politico covered him, even though he wouldn't have been in the news otherwise. So just to kind of sum it up, when it's talking about the political cycle and the levels of media coverage, political blogs, they need things to cover, and they know that traffic increases during election. The reality is that the election is far away, and that doesn't align with this. So they're going to create candidates early. They're going to focus on controversial candidates, and thus the election cycle will start earlier, and we get to talk about politics 24/7. And then the person they cover, due to that coverage, becomes a legitimate candidate. And the people who profit most of all are the political blogs, of course. So okay, so the third level of media manipulation that I wanted to talk about was social media, which I know we all have had some time with, me especially. I use TikTok a little bit too much. So this picture, I love this picture so much. I don't know how many of you remember this, but back in 2018, there's this picture of Justin Bieber that circled around of him just like biting into a burrito. And I like this is a disgrace. Like, this is not okay. And so this is kind of talking back to that levels of media coverage. Like, people will share stuff if it's controversial. And so it turns out it was fake. I don't know if any of you guys knew that it was fake. Hope you do. But the people who made this image, they found someone that looks like Justin Bieber. They dressed him up, and they literally went through so many different scenarios of what is the most controversial? What is going to make people the angriest that we can share that this will blow up? And this ended up on major news sources. This ended up on TVs in the homes of thousands of people across America. And the entire time, it wasn't even real, and people thought it was. So that just shows how easy it is to spread misinformation and disinformation. I guess this would be more of online. But
what is driving the internet crazy?
Starting with Justin Bieber. This is how he eats.
I would highly recommend watching that video. It's such a good watch just to see how they did all of it. Okay, so here is a little graphic by Pew Research Center. I think this was back in 2022, and it was showing which people got news from social media. So 31% of people regularly get news on Facebook, 25% on YouTube, 14% on Twitter, 13% on Instagram, and you can see all the other ones there. And this is kind of troubling because let me show you some statistics. So this was a study done by some MIT scholars back in 2018 called The Spread of True and False News Online. And they found that false news stories are 70% more likely to be retweeted than true stories are. And it takes true stories 6 times as long to reach 1,500 people as it does for false stories. And they saw that novelty and emotional posts, and like with the Justin Bieber stuff, controversial stuff, this will inspire a greater reaction. And so people are going to share false news stories more because they're like, oh, this is what I need, and they want that bigger reaction. And so this is kind of scary that when people are getting a lot of their news from Facebook, you know, the 31% over here, a lot of them are sharing false news. So here's just an example of how misinformation really influenced politics. So back in 2016, there were some tweets going around, some allegations going around that Hillary Clinton was involved in a child sex ring. And, you know, 2016, this was a big year for America. And this was a highly radicalized, divisive year politically as people are going up to the debate. And, you know, there's a lot of people who will just try and find any dirt on any candidate they can except theirs. And so this hashtag started going around, hashtag Pizzagate, because they believed that she had the child sex ring in the basement of a Comet ping pong like pizza place in Washington. And all the evidence that these people had was that one of the members of her party had an email with the owner of the Comet ping pong. Like, that's it. There was absolutely no victim. There was no FBI investigation, no police investigation. There was zero evidence for this. And there's not even a basement in the Comet ping pong. So like, where would the ring be at, you know? And a man believed this so strongly that he brought a gun to Comet ping pong and opened fire to save the children that, you know, didn't exist. So this is really dangerous. And this misinformation or disinformation, whatever it is, it can really harm politics, and it can be so hard to sift through and to know what's real or what's not real. And just while we're on social media, I wanted to show you guys something cool that I found the other day. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, so on Facebook, if you go to anyone, and that's including politicians, and you go to their About page transparency, you can go down to ad library and you can see every single ad they've ever run on Facebook, which, you know, is cool. But the coolest thing I found was this paragraph right here. And it says, there's a restriction period effect in the US from November 1st to November 8th. So new ads about social issues, elections, or politics can't be published. And if you have an existing ad, they can't be edited, like the topics that are in them in the writing. And I think this is so cool that Facebook is doing this, because this means you can't just like throw in something crazy controversial like 2 days before the election. And if something false does come up, there's some time to fact check it, and there's some time to look at it and, you know, figure out what it actually is. So I just thought that was really cool. Just a little fun fact for you guys. Let me get back here. Okay, so with all this craziness about this misinformation, it can be hard to know what to do. But what we should not be doing is just being spoon-fed the media. You know, we can't be passive consumers of the media, especially when it comes to our politicians and who we're voting for. And what we believe they do. We have to be active consumers of the media. And so this is kind of a little bit what this whole class is about. You know, a good thing to do is check before you share. A lot of times there will be this really crazy headline, and oftentimes the people who write the articles don't even write the headlines. Like, it might be the editor who writes the headlines to try and get as many clicks as possible. And so sometimes the headline isn't even what the article is about. And sometimes the article is completely bogus information, like that Mercola site. So you should just do you shouldn't do as intensive a fact checking as we did for the first project every single time you want to share something, but just, look around a little bit, do some lateral reading, check before you share something just to make sure it really is, I don't want to say the truth because truth is subjective, but to make sure it's, factually accurate. Another thing that's good to do is read between the lines, look for bias. Like I said at the beginning, you want to look, who is this new site tailored towards? Who is this writer trying to write to? Who is this person sharing this on social media? What motive do they have behind sharing this? And then another good thing you can do is use fact-checking sites for Pointer or All Sides. You can literally search up a topic and it'll pull up things it knows about those topics, which is super helpful when you're not sure who's telling the truth and who's lying. And so lastly, I just wanted to put a plug into the upcoming election that is next week. Isn't it so exciting? Oh my gosh, we can vote. Isn't that so cool? Like seriously, just take a second to think about that. We can vote. It's incredible. It's incredible. And talking with voting, our local elections are the most important elections for us personally, because that's going to affect what happens to the school districts here. It's going to affect what our local taxes are. It's going to affect our day-to-day lives so personally. And so local elections aren't necessarily, they don't have as much hype as the presidential elections, but they're still so important. And so for those of you not in Cache Valley, I'm sorry, I didn't look up voting information for your places. But if you're in Cache Valley, this website right here, 10 out of 10, you should go to it. It's just cachecounty.org/elections/ and it gives you so much information. Like you can see right here, this is the homepage of this website. So you can find your candidates, you can register to vote, you can track your ballot, and there's so many ways to vote. So I'll just go over a couple of them. You can vote by mail. So this you might have had to, hopefully you would have already voted by mail if you wanted to do that. And then you can vote early in person. On November 7th, you can drop your ballots in different boxes and it'll list all the different addresses on here. And then, of course, you can vote on election day, which is Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So here's one of the polling addresses. Well, the polling address, I guess. So take this address, go vote. It'll be so awesome. And when you're looking at candidates for this year and who you want to vote for, of course, I know we're all, a lot of us are young college students, or we've got this really big job we have to do, and there's not a lot of time in the day to go and deep dive research. That was a lot of alliteration, sorry. We don't have a lot of time to do a crazy amount of research on each candidate, but we can at least do a little bit. And so you can see some of the candidates on their website. And then something that I really love that the USU Statesman is doing on their website, if you go to the top bar on the left-hand side, there's a tab that says news, and you can click down to the Cache County elections, and it will give you a ton of information, just little summaries on a lot of the candidates, and just get to know them a little bit more. So I would highly encourage you all to check that out and to go vote this Tuesday. But yeah, that's all I had for you. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you guys have a great week.